Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently informed a budget committee assembly that she combats the elite every single day, just 6 hours after disembarking from a Bombardier Challenger private aircraft costing $15,000 per hour. She remained unaware that the vice president had dedicated his weekend to reviewing her FEC documents, examining them line by line, hotel by hotel, and sushi dinner by sushi dinner, much like he previously analyzed venture capital balance sheets in Silicon Valley, tracking every single dollar until its final destination. Once she concluded her critique of politicians bankrolled by billionaires, Vance offered no argument. He simply unsealed a slender manila folder containing no labels and lacking any theatrics, proceeding to vocalize a specific figure of $53,500. Afterward, he inquired if the representative grasped exactly how many $27 contributions that amount equaled. She certainly lacked that answer. Hit that like button as you are about to witness the vice president deconstruct a $53,000 upscale hotel invoice utilizing nothing beyond a congresswoman's personal campaign records and basic grade school arithmetic. On May 28, 2025, inside room 608 of the Dirksen Senate Office Building, the Senate Budget Committee initiated a session regarding campaign finance transparency during the social media era, a title resembling a collegiate seminar that functioned primarily as a pretext to capture American politics' most renowned small-dollar fundraiser on video. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez received an invitation to appear as an expert witness rather than as an official committee member. She belonged to the House instead of the Senate, yet as a trailblazer, she had accumulated more funds through $27 intervals than any prior congressional hopeful in history. She successfully transformed her Instagram stories into powerful capital-generating machines. She single-handedly established the plea to contribute $27 for the cause as a recognized cultural idiom. The committee eagerly desired to understand the exact method she employed. Vice President JD Vance directed the proceedings from the chairman's seat as a constitutional formality, wherein people expected him to merely hold the gavel and remain unobtrusive. AOC made her entrance exactly as she always did, not merely strolling into a space, but commanding it, much like paint dominates a canvas, featuring red lipstick, a white blazer, and the stance of someone who had commanded camera attention long before the majority of the committee's senators understood how to unmute their Zoom calls. She took her seat at the witness desk and tweaked her microphone, doing so not out of necessity but because tweaking a mic serves as the political counterpart to a fighter tapping gloves. She observed the committee, scanned the viewing gallery, and subsequently glanced upward toward the presiding officer's chair, where Vance rested with a manila folder placed upon his desk, prompting her to make a spontaneous decision that required roughly 2 seconds to formulate and would ultimately cost her roughly 2 years of credibility by abandoning her prepared remarks. Addressing the vice president with a tone resembling a challenge, she declared her intention to acknowledge the obvious issue, or rather the oligarch sitting in the chairman's seat, before delving into the topic of small-dollar donations. The atmosphere within the committee room immediately transformed. Financial hearings rarely commence with a House representative launching an offensive against the presiding official. Financial committee sessions typically begin with introductory remarks capable of functioning as heavy sedatives. You occupy that position solely because tech billionaire Peter Thiel determined you could serve a practical purpose. Your presence here has absolutely nothing to do with everyday citizens making small financial contributions. You have not arrived here because Ohio residents placed their faith in some organic grassroots campaign. Your position exists because a single individual signed a check, plucked you from a venture capital firm, and declared that you would suffice. Therefore, before this panel attempts to lecture anyone regarding campaign funding transparency, she hesitated, staring straight into the C-SPAN lens, perfectly pacing the moment as she always did since Ocasio-Cortez delivered performances rather than mere speeches, and every good routine requires a pause before the punchline, suggesting they might want to begin with the man holding the gavel. She had not yet concluded her remarks. She never stopped after delivering just a single blow. Her signature strategy relied on volume, throwing 3 jabs when a single strike sufficed. Knowing the home viewers primarily consume short video segments, and a higher quantity of strikes generates a greater number of viral segments. If you wish to discuss oligarchies, you embody the very definition of an oligarchy. You transitioned from authoring books about destitution to working for the wealthiest administration throughout American history. You never battle against the elite class, as you literally wedded into their ranks. You accepted Thiel's funding, rode along on Trump's ticket, and peddled your tale of impoverishment to whoever offered the largest sum. She directed her attention toward Vance, using not just one digit but her entire hand, a movement she had mastered during Instagram live broadcasts, utilizing an open palm gesture that appears slightly less hostile on video than a solitary pointing finger. And currently you lounge in that seat overseeing an inquiry into political financing, resembling a predator instructing a workshop regarding the protection of a poultry barn. She halted her speech to maximize the dramatic impact. She possessed a talent for dramatic stops, quite unlike Vance's heavy silences, utilizing pauses that functioned as tension-building inhalations. Do you realize what crosses my mind when I observe you sitting up there? I ponder the youth described in your memoir, the boy originating from Middletown, the child consuming fast food while dressed in second-hand suits, and I wonder where that boy vanished to, considering he surely does not occupy that seat. Peter Thiel currently occupies that seat, and the tech industry of Silicon Valley resides in that chair. That young man from Middletown serves as nothing more than the foundational myth utilized to market their merchandise. The audience in the gallery began to whisper. Their whispering carried the distinct vibration of a crowd observing a person take a massive gamble without yet knowing if the wager would prove successful. An assistant to AOC, a young lady holding a tablet, representing the type of staffer who routinely broadcasted live updates from proceedings before their conclusion, had already begun typing. The initial post had likely been composed beforehand, broadcasting that AOC had merely labeled Vice President Vance a predator giving a lecture regarding co-op protection. Up on the chairman's platform, Vance executed a rather unexpected action. He grinned, though not expansively, avoiding the typical politician's smirk that attempts to convey superiority over the situation. It was a minor, deliberate grin, the expression of an individual who had recently listened to his rival freely provide the precise vulnerability he had desired. This occurred because AOC had inadvertently provided two massive favors during her offensive without recognizing their true nature. Initially, she introduced the topic of finances, specifically his wealth, Thiel's capital, and elite funding, thereby unlocking the gateway to fiscal transparency, a portal that swings in two directions once unsealed. Secondly, she brought up Middletown, referencing the young boy, remaining completely oblivious to the fact that the youth remained present, that the boy holding the fast food water cup, wearing the thrift store attire, and dealing with a mother collapsed on the restroom tiles had never truly left. That youngster never departed. He simply acquired the skill to decipher financial ledgers. He held his tongue until she entirely concluded her statement. He then allowed 3 additional seconds of silence to pass. Following that delay, he finally opened the manila document holder. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, Vance stated, utilizing his standard, steady Midwestern inflection that remained neither boisterous nor hushed, perfectly tuned to a decibel level forcing listeners to lean forward instead of reclining backward. I am grateful for your input. I value the enthusiasm, and I wish to tackle your argument regarding the elite class since I consider the topic highly significant. He directed his gaze toward the documents before shifting his eyes back to her. Truthfully, I wish to examine your personal association with the elite class in considerable depth. Particularly, I want to discuss your 2025 campaign trail battling the oligarchy alongside Senator Sanders, encompassing 34 gatherings across 20 states with 300,000 participants. It stands as a highly impressive endeavor and a legitimate political triumph. He flipped to a new page, noting that he merely possessed a few inquiries regarding her transportation methods. Her physical stance remained completely unaltered. She operated as a seasoned expert in these exact scenarios. During that brief window separating an assault from a retaliation, The specific instant where novices stiffen while veterans remain relaxed, she maintained her composure. She had absolutely no idea what contents resided within that file. Your 2025 federal campaign disclosures, which exist as publicly accessible documents, Representative, as I feel certain you recognize, reveal that you and Senator Sanders journeyed to your anti-elite gatherings aboard private aircraft. He recited the information directly from the document. During 2025, Senator Sanders' organization dispersed $550,000 to exclusive aviation firms, including Ventura Air Services, NJet, and Cirrus Aviation. The principal airplane utilized happened to be a Bombardier Challenger, which, based on Ventura's personal webpage, boasts one of the most spacious interiors of any corporate plane currently on the market. He raised his eyes, noting that in April of 2025, Fox News secured pictures showing you and the senator entering that exact plane at Meadows Field Airport out in Bakersfield, California, and disembarking in Sacramento later that night while heading to an anti-elitist demonstration. He placed the paper back onto the desk. Renting a Bombardier Challenger runs roughly $15,000 for every single hour of flight time. You utilize this aircraft to instruct working-class individuals to combat the wealthy. He hesitated, not merely for a theatrical effect, but rather for sharp juxtaposition, as his upcoming statement was the specific trump card he had been reserving. Back in 2023, you stated, and I am citing your verified social media account, Representative, asking genuinely how many exclusive jets corporate executives require, labeling the behavior as gluttonous and intolerable. He lifted his gaze away from the text. Those represent your exact phrases from 2023 regarding corporate heads and exclusive aircraft, calling them gluttonous and intolerable. He rested the document onto the table. A couple of years afterward, you stepped onto the identical model of airplane you previously deemed gluttonous, soaring through the sky to urge citizens to battle the very individuals who utilize such planes. That behavior does not merely qualify as hypocrisy, Representative. Basic hypocrisy involves stating one belief while acting in a contradictory manner. This situation represents something far more calculated. This involves declaring a stance, filming yourself stating it, publishing the clip for 36 million supporters, proceeding to do the complete reverse, and then legally documenting the action as a political expenditure. He allowed the weight of that statement to settle before providing a counterexample, delivering it not as arrogance but as reality, mimicking the manner in which he shared all personal anecdotes, avoiding theatrics in favor of simple truth. Allow me to speak candidly regarding a certain matter. During my 2022 Senate campaign in Ohio, I navigated the state using a leased vehicle, specifically a Chevy Malibu obtained from Enterprise. The automobile featured a gray exterior, a detail I recall vividly since I occupied that sedan for 247 hours spanning a 4-month period. I possess this exact knowledge because the rental agency bills hourly, and I retained all of the invoices. I piloted that sedan from Columbus toward Cleveland, down to Cincinnati, over to Middletown, and completely back, occasionally completing the circuit twice within a single day. I consumed convenience store sandwiches from the driver's seat, specifically the plastic-wrapped varieties that you pray were assembled earlier that morning while secretly suspecting they were prepared the previous day. I previously conducted a radio broadcast while idling inside a Sheetz parking area in Lancaster, Ohio, simply because that establishment offered complimentary internet access and my operation lacked the funds for a portable cellular router. He took a momentary breath. That specific convenience store pavement carried the distinct odor of petroleum mixed with heated sausages. The wireless connection completely failed on 2 separate occasions throughout the broadcast. I sported discount trousers purchased at Target alongside a button-down requiring a steam press, yet I secured the electoral victory. He shifted his focus back toward Ocasio-Cortez. You traveled to combat elitism aboard an aircraft boasting the most expansive interior available in corporate flight. I battled for my congressional position from the asphalt of a fueling station, yet I am somehow labeled as the aristocrat inside this chamber. Her jawline clenched, a minor contraction that was barely noticeable, Yet it remained the sort of flinch easily identified by individuals who had analyzed her behavior for years. That facial tension appeared whenever an assault struck a vulnerable area she had failed to anticipate. She had adequately braced herself for accusations regarding Teal. She had readied her defenses for claims regarding marrying into wealth. She had absolutely no defensive strategy formulated against a rented Chevy Malibu. Such matters fell strictly under the category of operational logistics. She attempted to speak. That was merely the initial stop, Vance declared while flipping his document, not rudely cutting her off, but instead advancing forward like a river current, devoid of anger or aggression, flowing with pure inevitability. Let us now examine your choice of lodging. Your campaign finance records for 2025 reveal an expenditure of $53,500 dedicated exclusively to hotel accommodations. He recited the figure in the exact manner an auditor recites data, keeping his tone flat, highly accurate, and bordering on utter boredom. That displayed lack of enthusiasm served as his primary weapon. Statistics presented with high emotion frequently resonate like hostile allegations. Statistics presented with pure apathy resonate strictly as undeniable truths. I intend to list several of these lodging establishments, not the entire list since that would consume our entire afternoon, but an adequate amount to demonstrate a clear trend. He traced his index finger downward across the printed sheet. The list includes the Langham Huntington in Pasadena, a 5-star luxury resort, the Vidara Hotel and Spa in Las Vegas, a 4-star property linked to the Bellagio, the Lansdowne Resort and Spa in rural Virginia, the Asher Adams Hotel in Salt Lake City, costing $300 for the visit, the Leo Kent Hotel in Tucson, a boutique high-rise totaling $365.76, Hotel El Convento in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the Hyatt Grand Central in Manhattan, which representative sits roughly 7 miles away from your personal residence. He placed the documentation back down. You dropped $3,000 on overnight lodging located a mere 7 miles away from your own home. The audience collectively exhaled, producing a noise caught between a chuckle and a sharp intake of breath, representing the specific sound of individuals mentally calculating figures and despising the resulting sum. $53,500 exhausted within a single calendar year. The vice president stared directly at the representative. $53,500. Are you aware of the median household earnings within your congressional district, Representative? The congresswoman provided no verbal reply. Her facial expression remained rigidly locked, utilizing the same appearance she projected during cable broadcasts. A look meant to convey she was absorbing the information and would counter when properly prepared. However, the positioning of her hands revealed an entirely separate narrative. Her right hand, previously sitting comfortably atop the desk, now rested concealed within her lap. People drop their hands into their laps whenever those appendages require a place to hide. I took the liberty of researching that statistic. The standard household salary within New York's 14th congressional territory rests right around $52,000. Your lodging expenses over a 12-month period, strictly covering hotels and excluding airfare or dining, exceeded your typical constituent's annual gross income by a margin of $1,500. He allowed that mathematical reality to linger. $53,500 stacked against $52,000. The resulting discrepancy equaled $1,500. That difference represented practically nothing, yet that variance simultaneously represented absolutely everything. Your local voters labor for 50 weeks annually, enduring 50 weeks filled with public transit commutes, consecutive shifts, skipped evening meals, and alarms blaring at 5 in the morning. 50 exhaustive weeks, and upon completing that grueling stretch, they have acquired $1,500 less than you burned on luxury suites while instructing them to battle the ruling class. The representative tilted her body forward. Political transit remains a completely valid and lawful operational expenditure. The presiding officer completed his slow nod. You are entirely correct about that fact. Furthermore, the Langham Huntington certainly qualifies as a legitimate lodging establishment. It simultaneously functions as a five-star retreat, boasting an authentic Japanese garden and wellness treatments priced higher than the daily earnings of a Bronx medical caretaker. He flipped to the subsequent sheet of paper. Let us shift our focus toward your dining habits. Allow me to speak transparently regarding another detail. The individuals inside the chamber were quickly adapting to his conversational cadence. Each instance he requested to speak honestly signaled that the metaphorical dagger was about to strike. The gathered panel participants, spanning both conservative and liberal affiliations, completely ceased glancing at their cellular devices. The supporting staff members completely halted their keyboard strokes. The chamber possessed the distinct quietness of an audience observing an individual construct a legal argument much like a bricklayer erects a barricade, placing block upon block and tier upon tier without a single wasted movement. During my 17th year, my concept of dining out involved the local fast food discount board, not due to culinary preference, but because my total allowance equaled $3. His vocal tone remained steadfast, refusing to weaken into self-pity or crystallize into rage, simply delivering the information in the same manner one might report the daily forecast. I regularly occupied a seating arrangement inside the McDonald's, located along Verity Parkway within Middletown, holding a cheap chicken sandwich alongside a complimentary water container, since complimentary items carried immense significance. I frequently stared at the illuminated pricing board suspended above the registers, viewing photographs of premium burgers glowing brightly like cathedral windows, secretly hoping that perhaps one day I could afford them. He directed his eyes toward the New York representative. Your 2025 financial disclosures indicate purchases at a Manhattan sushi establishment featuring a $150 14-course sampling selection, a high-end seafood joint along the Vegas Strip, and a San Juan eatery serving mixed drinks priced above $20 apiece. Within Puerto Rico exclusively, spanning from June until September of 2025, your organization burned through $10,743 strictly covering culinary expenses and event food services. He placed the financial record upon the surface. Do you possess any concept regarding what $150 procures within your jurisdiction, representative? It purchases a fortnight's worth of supermarket supplies for an entire household. That means 14 days of grains, legumes, poultry, and whichever seasonal produce happens to be discounted. It covers half a month of assembling bagged meals since academic cafeterias also demand payment, 14 full days. He lightly struck the manila casing with his fingers. You blew that exact sum on a 14-course raw fish dinner, proceeding immediately to a public gathering where you informed your voters that wealthy elites were actively suffocating them financially. You accurately assessed that affluent individuals are indeed extracting their wealth. You merely omitted the detail wherein you consumed 14 luxurious courses funded entirely by their individual $27 contributions. The Congresswoman parted her lips to initiate a verbal response. Such expenditures represent standard campaign protocols. However, her statement terminated prematurely, not because her counterpart interrupted her, but because she internally processed her own words. She immediately realized how the phrase standard campaign expenditure would resonate following an anecdote regarding an impoverished teenager sipping from a complimentary fast food cup. She mentally previewed the inevitable viral video, combining her defense of routine political spending seamlessly interwoven with his solemn declaration that complimentary beverages genuinely mattered. Consequently, she sealed her lips tightly. Her defense perished immediately following the word campaign. That marked the initial remark she had actively suppressed during the entire proceeding. It certainly would not serve as the final one. The chairman rotated the next page into view. His dossier appeared increasingly slender, not because it originally possessed immense bulk, but because every discarded sheet represented an exposed layer, dragging the viewing gallery steadily closer toward the core revelation waiting at the bottom. We look now to August 2025 in San Juan, Puerto Rico. You delivered an impassioned address regarding urban gentrification, detailing how blue-collar households faced economic eviction from their native districts and lamenting the forced migration of localized groups holding generational roots within those specific blocks. He affirmed this with a slow nod. It was a highly effective presentation. I state that with absolute sincerity. The housing displacement crisis impacting San Juan remains entirely factual, and you discussed the issue projecting authentic emotional depth. He halted his momentum briefly. That compliment functioned solely as the trap's bait. The gathered attendees understood his tactical rhythm perfectly by this juncture. During that identical week on that exact excursion, photographers captured you occupying an exclusive VIP enclosure during a Bad Bunny performance inside the Coliseo de Puerto Rico, physically dancing within premium stadium seating. Your political finance disclosures expose venue leasing fees totaling $23,712.62 charged by that identical stadium, split across two distinct transactions of $16,725 during June and $6,962 nearing late August. He fixed his gaze upon the Congresswoman. You informed the citizens of San Juan regarding their systemic removal from their own communities, immediately proceeding to dance inside a luxury concert box where your organization dumped 23 grand, all occurring within the identical municipality over the span of a few days. The vice president shook his head, avoiding any theatrical exaggeration in favor of a sluggish, distinctly mournful side-to-side motion that served as his personal trademark. It conveyed the body language of an individual devoid of fury over such duplicity, appearing instead bewildered by the contradiction, resembling an architect thoroughly perplexed by a structurally sound overpass randomly crumbling. Furthermore, your political machine wired an additional $9,040 directly to the Hotel Palacio Provincial situated within San Juan. Your aggregate expenditures across Puerto Rico throughout that single fiscal quarter, representing merely 3 months, reached roughly $50,000. 50 grand exhausted within a territory where you explicitly warned residents that wealthy tycoons were actively seizing their personal dwellings. He broke his speech, briefly examined his palms, and subsequently returned his visual focus onto his opponent. Allow me to describe the true appearance of community displacement from an internal perspective, Representative, since I have personally witnessed it, not within San Juan, but rather back in Middletown. Once the local metal foundries shut their doors, residential properties plummeted in value. Following that massive depreciation, real estate speculators invaded, skipping the massive corporate builders in favor of independent operators who snatched up entire neighborhood blocks for $30,000 a pop, renovating them strictly to resell at $120,000, effectively financially evicting households harboring 3 generations of localized history. I personally observed this exact phenomenon unfold along my grandmother's residential avenue. Mama's longtime neighbors, the same individuals who shared backyard grills with her, monitored my childhood development and dialed emergency services whenever my mother's romantic partners became violent, found themselves economically banished one after another, resembling decaying teeth dropping from a diseased smile. He established direct eye contact with the Congresswoman once more. I inherently comprehend the agonizing sensation associated with urban displacement. The experience equates to helplessly watching your childhood community morph into a stranger's lucrative financial portfolio. I would absolutely never stand before a crowd to monetize that specific trauma and subsequently go party inside an exclusive stadium enclosure within that very same municipality during that exact same week. I refuse such actions because the exact demographics you claim to represent possess zero capacity to purchase premium luxury seating. They lack the financial liquidity to secure even the cheapest standard admission. A significant portion of them cannot even scrounge up the bus fare required to travel toward the stadium. Yet you continued to dance. He shifted his weight toward the rear of his chair. Such behavior does not equate to battling on behalf of blue-collar citizens, Representative. That merely equates to touring working-class misery during the interludes separating your musical entertainment. The representative's digital assistant had entirely ceased her keyboard inputs. The electronic device rested completely dormant atop her thighs. Within the Beltway ecosystem, An inactive screen during a congressional inquiry functions identically to a surrendered white flag. This indicates the staffer determined nothing currently transpiring deserves live broadcasting, as every single moment unfolding within the chamber will inevitably populate hostile opposition research dossiers. The Congresswoman herself adjusted her positioning, executing a subtle maneuver that entirely reconfigured her physical balance. She had initiated the assembly pitched aggressively forward, projecting the unmistakable stance of a predator. Currently, she found herself pressed firmly against the seat's backing. Her physical disposition shifted, mimicking the ocean's tide, drifting slowly and without detection until one suddenly recognizes the surf has retreated 6 feet, leaving them stranded atop parched sand. "While we remain focused upon your geographical movements," Vance injected, framing the comment practically as a casual tangent, though that casualness operated flawlessly as a concealed blade masquerading as a trivial appendix. "The Federal Border Coordinators Division has formally verified an active inquiry targeting your organization for hiring illegal aliens and organizing workshops detailing methods to bypass immigration authorities. I intend to allow that specific probe to reach its natural conclusion without interference. However, I feel compelled to mention that the foundational document you referenced during your rebuttal, the very Constitution you instructed Mr. Homan to review, explicitly features Article 1, which firmly establishes the legal obligations belonging to a congressional representative. Active federal obstruction absolutely does not reside among those listed duties." He advanced to the subsequent sheet. "We have reached the final document. We have a single remaining topic to cover, Representative, and I prefer to navigate this specific area with extreme caution." The entire chamber physically sensed the atmospheric alteration. The change did not originate from the vice president's vocal cords, as his pitch remained flawlessly static over the past 20 minutes. The transition occurred purely within the ambient environment. This transition manifested as the collective sensation of an audience recognizing the impending arrival of the final dramatic act. During March of 2026, the National Legal and Policy Center submitted a formal grievance alleging your organization disbursed $18,225 toward an individual named Dr. Brian W. Boyle. He articulated the physician's title with deliberate care and deep respect, mirroring the vocal pattern individuals use prior to addressing highly delicate matters. The transactions occurred across 3 installments: $11,550 on March 10th, $2,800 on May 15th, and $4,375 on October 1st, totaling $18,725. Each distinct financial transfer appeared upon your federal disclosures strictly categorized as executive coaching and professional consulting. He elevated his line of sight. Dr. Boyle operates professionally as an interventional psychiatrist. Clinical journals specifically characterize him as a premier specialist regarding ketamine-facilitated therapeutic treatments. According to his personal webpage, his career portfolios, and every accessible public registry, he absolutely does not market leadership development or advisory services toward political operations. The chairman deposited the paper onto his desk. At this exact moment, his vocal resonance shifted for the very first time. It did not amplify or grow abrasive, but rather became distinctly and purposefully gentler, mimicking the muted tone people adopt before delivering information capable of inflicting profound injury if navigated clumsily. "I desire absolute clarity regarding this upcoming point. I categorically refuse to weaponize the topic of psychological wellness. Every individual, including every single person occupying this chamber and residing across this nation, inherently deserves unhindered access to psychological assistance. My own mother desperately required such care, though she frequently failed to receive it. Countless American citizens desperately need these treatments, yet completely lack the financial means to procure them. Psychological stability never functions as a comedic punchline. It never serves as a permissible weapon. I absolutely refuse to deploy it in such a malicious capacity." He halted his speech, allowing his defensive perimeter to establish itself so the gallery understood his absolute sincerity. "Our primary concern does not involve Dr. Boyle. Our contention has absolutely nothing to do with medical therapy. The genuine problem centers strictly upon the specific line item within your financial disclosure claiming executive training and advisory services. If these disbursements funded individual psychiatric sessions, precisely as the formal grievance contends, they unequivocally classify as private expenditures. Private expenditures strictly cannot be legally satisfied utilizing political donations. Furthermore, documenting them as consultancy fees when they served a completely divergent purpose does not constitute a minor administrative blunder. It represents deliberate falsification upon a federal ledger. He locked eyes with the representative. Your financial backers, those specific $27 contributors serving as the bedrock of your entire political persona, provided their capital so you could advocate on their behalf not to finance personal treatments hidden behind fraudulent accounting descriptions. They sacrificed those $27 because they genuinely trusted that currency would directly fund the ideological battle. Did it actually do so? The Congresswoman unsealed her lips. Those specific disbursements funded legitimate campaign? The statement instantly evaporated. She consciously perceived the words failing. The entire chamber witnessed the sentence collapse, primarily because legitimate campaign consulting represented the precise terminology plastered across the disputed document, and the active federal grievance specifically challenged that exact wording as intentionally deceptive. Parroting a phrase currently facing federal scrutiny for potential fraud rarely resonates as an adequate defense. Instead, it registers as arrogant stubbornness. She launched a secondary attempt. Dr. Boyle rendered professional services that defense flatlined immediately. Completing that thought required either validating the treatments as psychiatric in nature, thereby confirming the financial document contained fraudulent data, or insisting the services involved political consulting, an assertion utterly contradicted by the physician's own public credentials. She initiated a third desperate effort. I have remained entirely cooperative alongside. She actively interrupted her own statement during this attempt. She aborted the sentence because citing cooperation with federal investigators remains the standard boilerplate language utilized exclusively by individuals who have recently retained criminal defense attorneys. 3 separate statements resulted in 3 consecutive verbal miscarriages. The legendary rapid-fire articulation, that trademark machine gun cadence dominating cable television segments, social media debates, and digital stories, utilizing sheer vocal momentum to bury adversaries beneath an avalanche of words, had completely malfunctioned. Her mutiny resulted not from Vance actively censoring her speech, but rather from raw mathematics rendering her completely mute. Her own personal statistics, her own submitted ledgers, and her very own transaction records sealed her lips. The vice president snapped the dossier shut, pushed it aside, and interlaced his fingers atop the wood, assuming the exact posture he utilized whenever the analytical portion concluded and human interaction commenced. Representative, I possess exactly one final inquiry. The gallery veterans immediately identified that specific preamble from preceding assemblies. A single inquiry from the chairman never genuinely consisted of just one isolated question. It functioned as an encompassing riddle harboring every preceding query, similar to how a tiny acorn conceals a massive oak. Your federal disclosures from 2025 demonstrate the subsequent data. He completely ignored the physical document. The file remained firmly shut. He had committed the entire sequence to memory. The figures flowed straight from his cerebral cortex, mimicking the effortless recall of a veteran venture capitalist who memorizes financial metrics out of sheer habit rather than active exertion. $53,500 exhausted upon premium and specialty lodging. $18,725 funneled toward a mental health professional, masquerading as operational consulting. Your projected portion of exclusive aviation expenses alongside Senator Sanders, calculated highly conservatively at $80,000 based upon individual passenger distribution during joint travel. Roughly $50,000 burned across Puerto Rico within a single 3-month window covering rooms, dining, and stadium leases. That totals approximately $200,000 in luxury lifestyle maintenance crammed into a single 12-month cycle and disguised as legitimate political overhead. He paused momentarily. That massive figure hovered heavily throughout the chamber. 200 grand materialized, and the entire gallery sat paralyzed beneath its weight. Your typical grassroots supporter sacrifices $27 per transaction. He locked his vision onto the Congresswoman. Exactly how many $27 contributions are required to cover a single evening inside the Langham Huntington over in Pasadena? Complete quiet followed. A single second passed, 2 seconds elapsed, 3 ticks faded away. The representative remained frozen. Her facial muscles held their practiced television expression, appearing serene and prepared, presenting the facade of someone possessing an immediate rebuttal for any conceivable scenario. Unfortunately, she entirely lacked a retort against raw arithmetic. One cannot politically manipulate basic division. One cannot apply a social media filter over cold calculations. Mathematical truths remain utterly indifferent regarding your digital follower count. 4 seconds dragged by, 5 full seconds vanished, 6 seconds ticked off the clock. The attendees tracked the duration in the exact manner people normally measure the vice president's dramatic pauses, relying upon internal cardiac rhythms rather than mechanical wristwatches. Every passing moment stretched noticeably longer than the preceding beat. 7 seconds expired, 8 ticks disappeared. The Congresswoman's right palm drifted toward her beverage tumbler, not seeking hydration but desperate for a physical anchor. The crystal container functioned as a stabilizing weight, providing a tangible object to grasp that did not represent an impossible inquiry. Her digits curled tightly around the cylinder, mimicking the desperate clutch of an individual grabbing a handrail during an earthquake. She clung to it not because the barrier offered actual salvation, but simply because gripping a solid object feels infinitely superior to grasping empty air. 9 seconds dissolved, 10 seconds ultimately finalized. Her subordinate's digital device remained entirely blank. That screen had remained deactivated ever since the Puerto Rican revelation. Up in the viewing section, a journalist representing The Hill documented the exact duration utilizing her cellular stopwatch application. She subsequently published the precise chronological measurement online. She noted it spanned 10.3 seconds, declaring it the most prolonged dead air she had ever recorded during a federal inquiry. The presiding officer gave a slight nod. "I am happy to compute the figures on your behalf." His tone dropped to a murmur completely devoid of mockery or victory, adopting the specific hush an educator utilizes when a pupil flounders, fully aware that public humiliation imparts a stronger lesson than rote memorization. A solitary evening inside the Langham Huntington commands roughly $4,000 according to your own operational ledger. Divided by $27 per contribution, the sum requires exactly 148 individual financiers. That equals 148 employed American citizens. That represents 148 individuals who unlocked their devices, navigated toward ActBlue, and manually entered their banking credentials, memorized digits they constantly punch in to cover housing, food, utilities, and childhood portraits, surrendering $27 because they genuinely believed those funds would fuel the ideological crusade. He permitted the number 148 to hang heavy inside the chamber. 148 human beings funding a single evening inside a lone hotel room for a politician, demanding those exact same individuals wage war against the ruling class. The marginalized citizen you constantly reference represents the very person donating those $27, Representative. Vance's vocal projection reduced to a near whisper, utilizing the specific low frequency that microphones catch and broadcast louder than an aggressive scream. You took their $27 and burned it on a luxury suite they will never possess the financial capacity to visit. Ocasio-Cortez remained seated behind the witness desk, demonstrating an entirely unnatural lack of motion. She inherently operated as a highly kinetic individual, relying heavily upon constant movement, physical gestures, rapid-fire dialogue, social media clips, sharp rebuttals, and viral confrontations. Complete stillness simply did not belong within her standard repertoire. However, the undeniable arithmetic had completely stripped away her usual arsenal, functioning exactly like a power grid failure extinguishing every light bulb in a building. The only remaining image featured a politician paralyzed in her chair, staring down at her own financial disclosures resting atop the wood, knowing 148 working-class supporters financed every single lodging invoice. Vance rose from his seat and adjusted his necktie, performing the gesture not because the fabric required straightening, but because standing up and tugging a collar signify the universal body language of a man concluding his business. You arrived here today intending to lecture the public regarding small-dollar fundraising, Representative. I firmly believe we have adequately addressed that specific topic. He scanned the gathered committee members, shifted his focus back to Ocasio-Cortez, and finally locked eyes with the viewing gallery. The citizens sacrificing their $27 inherently deserve to understand exactly where their currency traveled. Fortunately, they now possess that exact knowledge, recognizing it funded 5-star resorts, 14-course raw fish dinners, premium stadium enclosures, exclusive aviation, and a mental health professional fraudulently categorized as an operational consultant. He retrieved the remarkably slender manila folder, signaling the absolute end of his presentation. I personally navigated a leased gray Chevy Malibu from Enterprise, costing $247 weekly, surviving on convenience store sandwiches while relying upon complimentary Sheets internet, and I successfully captured a federal Senate position. He directed his vision toward the New York representative for one final moment. You incinerated $200,000 of other people's hard-earned cash pretending to battle the elite class from deep within the luxurious bowels of that very oligarchy, and you subsequently forfeited the only currency that genuinely carries weight. He offered one last calculated pause before delivering the final blow. You entirely, completely obliterated their fundamental trust. He collapsed back into his leather chair and formally placed the investigative hearing into a temporary recess. The wooden mallet struck the sounding block a single time, producing a crisp, piercing, and definitive crack that reverberated endlessly throughout room 608. That sharp acoustic wave mimicked the precise and absolute nature of mathematics, leaving absolutely zero margin for alternative interpretations. The initial viral segment required absolutely zero editorial manipulation. It simply featured his inquiry regarding how many $27 donations covered a single evening at the Langham Huntington, followed by 10 agonizing seconds of dead air, concluding with his devastating summary of 148 citizens funding one night inside one room. That raw 53-second clip struck Twitter, migrated immediately to TikTok, subsequently flooded Instagram, and eventually permeated the deeper corners of the internet where viral videos transcend simple media and morph into massive cultural touchstones. The footage accumulated 22 million impressions within a mere 8 hours, achieving virality not through cruelty or humor, but through undeniable mathematical truth. Pure arithmetic remains the single concept the digital world fundamentally cannot debate. Partisan defenders desperately attempted to argue that political transit remains entirely standard, insisting every candidate requires lodging, and claiming these practices represent basic operational procedures. However, the counter-arguments remained universally identical, endlessly repeating the phrase regarding 148 citizens, $27 and a single night, urging everyone to simply do the math. The figure of 148 rapidly transformed from a simple statistic into a universally recognized unit of measurement. Citizens immediately began questioning the mathematics behind every single political disbursement. If a political action committee blew 50 grand on a gala, users immediately noted it cost 1,852 individuals, sacrificing $27 apiece. Whenever a federal lawmaker traveled via first-class seating, the internet instantly demanded to know the exact amount of 148s required to cover the upgrade. That specific number entirely escaped the confines of the congressional chamber, evolving into a lethal digital tool. It became an instrument allowing anyone possessing a cellular calculator to instantly measure the massive hypocritical distance spanning between a politician's public rhetoric and their documented financial disclosures. The numerical metrics seamlessly cross deeply entrenched partisan boundaries. A liberal political consultant appeared on MSNBC and reluctantly admitted the absolute devastation caused by the figure. He visibly struggled while delivering the assessment, resembling a dental professional informing a patient they desperately require a massive root canal, noting that the 148 statistic destroys narratives because it relies upon basic division rather than subjective opinion. You simply cannot fact-check a mathematical equation. A conservative strategist appearing on Fox News quickly countered that nobody needs to verify the math. They merely require a cheap calculator and a functioning moral compass. Within a 48-hour window, an anonymous developer launched a dedicated website titled 148donors.com. Users simply inputted any political expenditure, and the software instantly calculated the exact volume of $27 contributors required to finance the purchase. The platform completely crashed on 2 separate occasions due to overwhelming server traffic. By the 3rd day of operation, visitors had utilized the conversion tool a staggering 4.3 million times. The most frequently calculated item involved a $35,000 Met Gala admission, which equaled precisely 1,296 individual donors. The second most heavily searched expenditure involved the $15,000 hourly rate for exclusive aviation, equating to 556 supporters per hour of flight. The third most popular search queried the $150 raw fish dinner, which resulted in 5.6 human contributors. That final fractional result quickly spawned its own isolated meme format. Because you obviously cannot dissect a human being into 6/10 of a person, that specific decimal highlighted the absolute cruelty of the situation. An individual's entire $27 sacrifice failed to even cover the total cost of the luxurious meal, managing only to finance the introductory appetizer. The rental vehicle anecdote achieved its own separate viral trajectory, completely divorced from the primary scandal. The corporate social media division at Enterprise Rent-A-Car officially posted that while they typically avoid political commentary, they absolutely do lease gray Chevy Malibus for $247 weekly. That specific digital update rapidly accumulated 4 million positive endorsements. An internet sleuth successfully geolocated the exact Sheetz convenience store situated in Lancaster, Ohio, where Vance conducted his desperate radio broadcast, and quickly uploaded a photograph of the location. The local franchise operator subsequently erected a custom sign advertising their complimentary internet as sufficient for a future vice president. That specific parking lot advertisement quickly evolved into a mandatory pilgrimage destination for right-leaning media personalities. Within a single week, 3 additional Sheetz locations blatantly copied the promotional display. Enterprise simultaneously launched a specialized Malibu vehicle category, cheekily rebranding their most economical rental tier with a subtle nod to the viral moment. The stark contrast comparing a $150 dinner against a fortnight of groceries generated an entirely new cottage industry focused on budgetary analysis. A domestic sciences educator residing in Detroit uploaded a TikTok video demonstrating the exact volume of supermarket goods that some procures within the Bronx. The 17-minute recording painstakingly documented every single item and grocery bag individually. The broadcast concluded with the instructor displaying the massive receipt while declaring that the total covers 2 full weeks of sustenance for a 3-person household, perfectly contrasting the single 14-course luxury meal. That specific piece of media garnered 31 million views and received a direct endorsement from the vice president's verified social media channel. Legal ramifications quickly materialized shortly thereafter. The Federal Election Commission rapidly expedited their review concerning the physician's disputed compensation. The Congresswoman's political organization immediately retained specialized external legal representation, entirely distinct from their standard corporate counsel. Within the Beltway ecosystem, securing outside legal defense equates to a medical patient seeking a secondary diagnosis after their primary physician gravely requests a serious conversation. The Congressional Ethics Board, which had previously terminated its inquiry regarding the Met Gala incident back in July of 2025, following her payment of a minor restitution fee, formally announced a preliminary probe examining these newly discovered spending habits. It remained merely a preliminary review rather than an official investigation. However, inside the Capitol, a preliminary assessment universally represents the initial descending footstep upon a staircase leading exclusively downward. The anti-elitist tour expenditures officially transitioned into the primary target of a Government Accountability Office inquiry. Two conservative senators, alongside one notable independent lawmaker, formally submitted the request demanding an exhaustive audit covering all political transit costs exceeding double the standard federal daily allowance. The official legal documentation specifically highlighted Ocasio-Cortez's financial disclosures by name. Her 2028 presidential campaign polling metrics, which previously positioned her among the top 3 contenders securing the Liberal nomination during early 2025, plummeted 9 complete points following the initial post-hearing statistical survey. The massive drop resulted not from the scandal itself, but strictly from the undeniable mathematics. A left-leaning political strategist confidentially informed Politico that a candidate cannot possibly campaign as the champion of the working class when their financial ledgers resemble a premium travel influencer's itinerary. A secondary consultant, insisting upon strict anonymity, provided a significantly blunter assessment. They noted that the $27 contributor previously functioned as her ultimate political superpower. Vance successfully inverted that exact superpower directly into her lethal kryptonite. Whenever she publicly requests another $27 moving forward, the entire electorate will instantaneously visualize the number 148. That inescapable numeric anchor will drag closely behind her straight through the 2028 election cycle. The entire anti-oligarchy brand, which she and Sanders masterfully constructed into a massive cultural phenomenon featuring apparel, digital broadcasts, and a national stadium tour, turned completely radioactive overnight. The collapse occurred not because the public gatherings lost their populist appeal. It happened because the hidden logistical reality operating behind the curtains suddenly became highly visible. Once exposed, the exclusive aviation 5-star accommodations and premium raw fish dinners perfectly mirrored the exact elite ruling class the tour ostensibly sought to destroy. 3 days following the disastrous congressional assembly, Ocasio-Cortez uploaded a new update to her Instagram story. She avoided offering any direct verbal response or defensive rebuttal. Instead, she published an image showing herself actively distributing meals at a community church pantry located within the Bronx. She attached a simple caption declaring that community service remains the genuine work, exactly as it always has been. The post successfully generated 2 million positive interactions. However, the upload simultaneously attracted 340,000 critical written replies. The most popular response, heavily endorsed with 89,000 likes, simply questioned exactly how many $27 donations financed the private flight required to secure that specific photo opportunity. Consequently, she completely ceased all digital posting for 6 consecutive days. For a prominent figure who originally constructed her entire political empire relying upon daily social media engagement, and who successfully weaponized digital stories into formidable partisan instruments, a 6-day absence registered as a catastrophic seismic event. That specific tremor easily registered at a magnitude of 148 on the political Richter scale. Maria Gutierrez rested heavily upon the mattress edge inside apartment 4C at 1847 Vice Avenue over in the Bronx. She occupied the identical residence, sat upon the exact same bedding, and stared at the same television resting upon her dresser. She kept the volume strictly dialed down to 14 because the building's partitions lacked sufficient insulation, and her neighbor, Mrs. Dominguez, worked nocturnal shifts and required daytime rest. Maria deeply respected the concept of sleep because she intimately understood the desperate physical necessity of achieving it. The clock read 6:40 in the evening, and she remained dressed in her lavender medical caretaker uniform. She had purchased those specific garments at a specialized retailer located on Westchester Avenue for $22.99 apiece. She bought them in a bundle of 3 for $60 because purchasing them simultaneously conserved $8.97. That saved $8.97 perfectly covered the combined cost of a gallon of dairy and a loaf of sliced bread. You absolutely do not squander nearly $9 when your annual salary caps out at $38,000. The viral congressional footage continuously looped upon her cellular screen. She had already consumed the broadcast 3 separate times. She currently observed it for a 4th consecutive viewing because that specific number relentlessly ricocheted around her skull like a rubber sphere trapped inside a tiny closet. 148. Maria actively contributed $27 toward the representative's political war chest on a monthly recurring basis. She initially established the automated transfer back in January of 2024 after watching a digital video addressing skyrocketing housing expenses within their borough. The clip highlighted surging lease agreements, negligent property owners refusing to repair heating systems, and entire households cramming into single-bedroom units strictly out of financial desperation. Maria had viewed that specific broadcast while sitting upon this exact mattress, wearing these exact medical scrubs, and genuinely believed the politician intimately understood their collective struggle. She selected the $27 tier simply because that represented the standard communal amount. It operated as the official benchmark, the recognized numerical symbol of the movement, and the ultimate financial identifier proving they stood united together. Furthermore, $27 exactly matched the specific sum Maria had recently withheld from her monthly budget to decline her daughter's academic portrait. It covered Isabella's 5th-grade memory package, specifically the bundle containing the wallet-sized photographs the child's grandparents desperately desired. Maria gently suggested they might purchase them the following year. Isabella politely agreed in the specific heartbreaking manner children accept disappointment, fully comprehending the denial but loving their parent far too deeply to argue the point. $27 represented the exact identical amount down to the final penny. 148 versions of herself completely mirrored the vice president's stark calculation. That meant 148 different Maria Gutierrezes existed. It required 148 separate women wearing lavender medical scrubs, earning barely 38 grand annually, denying their children's school portraits, and purchasing uniforms in bulk just to save $9. All of that collective sacrifice strictly funded a single evening at a luxurious accommodation she had never previously heard of, located within a municipality she had never visited. Maria unlocked her digital device, navigated directly into the ActBlue application, and located her recurring $27 monthly transfer directed toward Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for Congress. She stared blankly at the digital receipt for 10 full seconds. It mirrored the exact identical 10-second silence Vance had weaponized against the politician. She firmly pressed the cancellation button. The software immediately prompted her to confirm her absolute certainty regarding the termination. Maria remained deeply uncertain regarding numerous aspects of her existence, harboring doubts concerning her lease renewals, the reliability of her radiator, and the quality of Isabella's educational facility. She doubted practically everything, except for the absolute certainty that she cherished her daughter, labored exhaustively, and firmly recognized the true value of $27. Maria felt entirely confident regarding this particular decision. She spoke aloud to the vacant room, projecting her voice toward the uninsulated drywall and the slumbering neighbor resting beyond it. If this woman genuinely desires to battle the ruling class, she can begin by resting her head at a standard Holiday Inn. She force-closed the software, deposited her mobile device onto the bedside table, and transitioned toward the kitchen to commence meal preparation. She began cooking the identical dinner of rice, legumes, and poultry she prepared every Sunday to portion out for the upcoming week. It represented the standard culinary routine of a mother who intimately recognized the exact purchasing power of $27. That specific sum represented the literal dividing line separating a cherished childhood photograph from a meaningless political contribution. She had unfortunately selected the political donation. That exact contribution successfully purchased precisely 1/148th of a premium resort suite she would never physically inhabit. During the subsequent month, that identical $27 would finally purchase Isabella's academic portrait. Ronnie Castillo occupied the driver's seat of his Honda Civic, idling just outside Terminal B at LaGuardia Airport, patiently awaiting his next digital dispatch. The dashboard clock glowed brightly, displaying 9:17 in the evening. He had been continuously navigating the street since 11 that morning, logging 10 grueling hours behind the wheel. His lumbar region radiated immense pain. The Honda's left side seat padding featured a massive depression worn entirely through the fabric, the direct result of supporting his body weight across 63,000 miles of commercial transit. He perpetually intended to acquire an orthopedic support cushion. However, ergonomic pillows commanded a $30 price tag, and $30 equaled 2 solid hours of driving after deducting operational overhead. 2 hours of street navigation represented 2 hours he could otherwise dedicate to desperately needed slumber. Therefore, the ergonomic pillow permanently remained stranded upon his digital Amazon wish list, serving as a graveyard for unaffordable desires. His primary cellular device leaned precariously against the dashboard display. It utilized a cheap suction cup mount he acquired for $7 at a fueling station. It represented the specific inferior model that lost vacuum pressure every third day, forcing him to manually reattach the plastic continually. He tolerated the inconvenience because a $7 mount requiring constant maintenance ultimately beats a $25 rig that operates flawlessly. His secondary device operating the Lyft network consisted of a heavily fractured iPhone 8 he secured from a street vendor in Jackson Heights for $60. It rested inside the central cup holder, angled perfectly so he could simultaneously monitor both illuminated screens. Operating dual devices across 2 competing applications ensured whoever dispatched a passenger first secured his driving services. The viral Vance clip currently played across the Uber phone, specifically highlighting the massive hotel expenditures. Ronnie was a 26-year-old native of Queens, born to a blue-collar automotive mechanic. His father turned wrenches at a garage located on Northern Boulevard until his spine completely failed him back in 2019. His mother earned $31 grand annually serving meals to random children inside an academic cafeteria before returning to their apartment to feed her own offspring. Ronnie originally intended to enroll at the local community college immediately following his high school graduation. Unfortunately, his father's physical collapse required surgical intervention that their medical insurance refused to fully subsidize. The household desperately needed a replacement breadwinner, while the patriarch underwent physical rehabilitation. Consequently, Ronnie registered as an Uber operator the week after receiving his diploma and permanently skipped his freshman orientation at LaGuardia Community College. He fully recognized the bitter irony of his current situation. He parked directly outside the LaGuardia Aviation Terminal every single evening awaiting transit fares. He operated his vehicle mere miles away from the specific educational institution sharing the exact same name, a campus he never officially attended. He occasionally observed the enrolled scholars walking toward their evening lectures carrying heavy backpacks and clutching caffeinated beverages. He frequently caught himself thinking that he belonged among their ranks. However, engaging in such wistful thoughts consumed valuable time. Time translated directly into passenger fares, and completed fares equaled essential capital. Capital remained the singular force separating idle daydreams from physical reality. He generated roughly $38,000 annually prior to deducting his operational expenses. After calculating petroleum costs, commercial insurance premiums, vehicular finance installments, routine mechanical maintenance, and the massive self-employment tax burden. The government springs upon independent contractors every April. His genuine hourly wage hovered around $14. On particularly brutal days featuring punctured tires or randomly canceled surge pricing, his rate plummeted to $12. He had meticulously calculated his true earnings once while idling in this exact parking spot during a completely stagnant hour at 3 in the morning realizing he occasionally netted a miserable $9 an hour. Earning $9 hourly fell significantly below the legal minimum wage threshold. He effectively operated an independent transportation business, utilizing dual smartphones and cross-platform applications, grinding out 63,000 miles while failing to clear the basic minimum wage floor. Ironically, Ocasio-Cortez continuously demanded that exact wage floor elevate to $22. Ronnie had never personally slept inside a hotel room. He never secured lodging for a single leisurely vacation. He fundamentally could not afford to take recreational time off. He never even rented a room when his sisters celebrated her matrimony over in New Jersey the previous October. He instead drove his sedan all the way back home at 2 in the morning because the local Holiday Inn demanded $139 for an overnight stay. $139 equaled 3 full days of grocery provisions for his household. He had navigated the darkened New Jersey Turnpike with severely fatigued eyes and an aching spine simply because he could not justify purchasing a temporary bed when his vehicle featured a reclining driver's seat. The reclining seat provided an entirely complimentary, albeit agonizing, sleeping arrangement. He never purchased lodging for a birthday celebration, a New Year's Eve party, or any other significant milestone event. The absolute closest he ever came to experiencing hotel hospitality involved passing out inside his Honda Civic at the LaGuardia Cellular waiting lot during a brutal double shift. He reclined the seat back as far as the mechanical hinges allowed, which proved entirely insufficient since compact sedans lack the architecture to support proper slumber. Furthermore, 26-year-old men possessing genetically defective spines inherited from their fathers struggle immensely with vehicular sleeping arrangements. $53,500 burned entirely upon luxury accommodations. Ronnie processed the mathematics using the identical rapid-fire methodology he applied to all calculations. He estimated the figures quickly and roughly, demonstrating the mental agility of a man forced to compute gratuities, fuel consumption, and toll fees in his head 60 times a day. Dividing $53,000 by his $38,000 gross annual income equaled roughly 1.4 years of his entire existence. That represented 1.4 years strictly comprised of 10-hour shifts, desolate LaGuardia parking lots, pathetic $7 plastic phone mounts, and a depressing Amazon wish list where ergonomic back cushions go to permanently die. He had surrendered a $27 contribution exactly one time. Back in January of 2024, the Congresswoman uploaded a digital video addressing skyrocketing rental rates across the borough of Queens. She perfectly described the suffocating lease agreements, the predatory property owners, and the unrelenting economic pressure crushing the working class. Ronnie had consumed that specific broadcast while idling inside the LaGuardia waiting lot between passenger fares, genuinely believing she truly comprehended their struggle. He had launched the ActBlue application and manually typed his debit card credentials. He possessed the numerical sequence entirely memorized, just as the vice president noted, because working-class citizens constantly enter those exact digits to satisfy housing, electrical, telecommunication, and automotive insurance bills. You simply do not forget numbers you are forced to type that frequently. He donated $27 as a solitary, isolated transaction. He never activated the recurring contribution feature simply because he fundamentally lacked the excess capital to sustain it. 148 versions of myself, Ronnie muttered directly toward his illuminated dashboard. That requires 148 exhausted drivers idling inside their sedans at LaGuardia just to finance a single evening inside a premium luxury suite. A notification suddenly chimed, signaling a passenger requiring transit from LaGuardia into Midtown Manhattan. He accepted the digital contract and immediately engaged the transmission. The navigation route guided him directly down the Grand Central Parkway, navigating past the massive interchange and the towering illuminated billboards. One specific advertisement towering on the left side featured a severely weathered promotional banner remaining from the politician's previous electoral campaign. A full calendar year of relentless solar radiation and torrential rainfall had heavily faded the vibrant pigments, though the core message remained entirely legible. It displayed a massive portrait of the representative flashing her signature smile, accompanied by a bold slogan claiming she fought exclusively for the people. Ronnie stared at the towering advertisement, refocused his vision upon the asphalt, and glanced at the projected financial estimate glowing upon his screen. The total fare equaled $34 before the corporate network extracted their massive percentage. That deduction left roughly $22 deposited into his personal account. After deducting the necessary fuel consumption required for the journey, his genuine profit hovered around $14. That sum proved nearly sufficient to finally purchase his desperately needed orthopedic cushion, yet it still fell tragically short. He depressed the accelerator and drove directly past the fading billboard. She boldly labeled her opponent an elite oligarch. He retaliated by publicly dissecting her massive luxury lodging invoices. She constantly insisted she battled relentlessly on behalf of the working class. He effectively countered by asking precisely how many working-class individuals were required to finance a single evening inside the Langham Huntington Resort. She utilized exclusive private aviation to instruct the masses to combat the elite ruling class. He navigated a leased gray Chevy Malibu to successfully secure a federal Senate victory. She comfortably consumed a 14-course premium raw fish dinner. He survived by consuming cheap chicken sandwiches alongside complimentary water specifically because the water lacked a price tag. May the Lord bless Maria Gutierrez, who actively canceled a $27 recurring political donation so her young daughter could finally secure a proper academic portrait. May the Lord bless Ronnie Castillo, who has never possessed the luxury of renting a hotel room, yet drives past a billboard claiming to fight for the people every single night while heading toward an airport parking lot. Furthermore, may the Lord bless every single $27 contributor who unlocked their cellular device, manually entered their banking credentials, and genuinely trusted their hard-earned capital would fund an ideological crusade. They placed their faith in a total falsehood, as their money strictly funded the Langham Huntington. The disclosures exposed 53 grand dropped on premium resorts, 18 grand wired to a psychiatric professional masquerading as a political consultant, 23 grand dumped into stadium VIP enclosures, $150 raw fish dinners, and over $500,000 burned on exclusive aviation. It required 148 individuals. That represents 148 Maria Gutierrez's and 148 Ronnie Castillo's. It demands 148 heavily burdened American citizens who labor through consecutive shifts, sacrifice childhood portraits, and slumber inside their vehicles to successfully finance every single premium lodging invoice. The marginalized citizen actively serves as the primary $27 financier. She completely exhausted their desperately needed capital strictly to inhabit a luxury resort they fundamentally cannot afford to visit. 148 individuals finance a single evening. Simply perform the mathematics yourself.